Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Mary Jane and I am the Event and Marketing Executive at Singapore FinTech Association. Today we will be presenting a webinar part of our Know Your Industry series titled Digital Assets, Is This the Next Revolution? Moderated by Shu Fen, the Head of Partnerships at SFA. Speaking today, we have David Packham, founder of Chintai, Jonas Thürig, Head of F10 Singapore, Leon Potthoff from GreeniumX, and Ziheng from Ventures Associate of Plug and Play. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the webinar, please feel free to type them in the Q&A box under the Zoom control panel. It will be brought up during the presentation, and we will also have time for Q&A at the end. Now, without further ado, we will turn the time over to Shu Fen. Shu Fen, please.
Thank you, MJ. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for taking your time to spend with us, this afternoon. And here we are going to talk about digital assets and tokenization for the next hour. So I think what I hope to achieve from this session is really to capture three key takeaways about digital assets and tokenization, which I think probably are words that are frequently used by our professionals in the financial or the fintech industry at least once in the last week or in the last month, right? So it's such a trending topic. What are we talking about when we talk about digital assets? If I just I recently read an EY report. If I just borrow their definition, right? If we establish the baseline definition of what digital assets and tokenization, it is simply the ability of converting the platform using blockchain to convert the rights or the value of an asset into a digital representation. And we've heard about all kinds of things being able to tokenize, from tangible assets like of value like real estate, food. We've heard of many things that are being tokenized in the metaverse, pair of shoes and fashion. We are talking about payments. We are also talking about content rights, right? So the promise of the technology in being able to tokenize digital assets is allegedly bringing cost savings, right? Cost optimization to the business, the top two concerns of a business, and also the ability maybe to find new money, create new revenue streams. Are we able to use it to find new investors or new clients? So here with us, we have curated an esteemed panel from practitioners, from platform enablers, innovation builders and incubators to kind of share their experience, their knowledge and insights and the use cases they are seeing in the industry. And through this discussion, we hope to sort of capture three takeaways. One, what are the assets, that can be tokenized? What is there a boundary? Is there like a breadth of assets that can be tokenized? And really, how does the technology bring about the cost reduction, the business optimization, and also create revenue streams for the business? And then thirdly, what should the considerations be? This relates directly to the questions that we received from the attendees ahead of the webinar. What should the considerations be for a business before you look at exploring digitizing your assets? So without further ado, I want to have the panel introduce themselves, who they are, and what their organization do. So maybe I'll just start alphabetically with Chintai. We have David, founder of Chintai.
Thank you very much. Yeah. So my name's David Packham. That's right. I'm the founder of Chintai, as well as the CEO. And to give some background about Chintai as an organization, although my own background is about 20 years in financial services for a number of the world's larger banks and asset managers prior to going into this. Chintai's really been put together as a company to provide a foundation upon which anybody from the most dynamic companies looking to disrupt industries right up to the largest financial institutions, it's providing them with a series of solutions that are shared across all parties that are looking to actually get into digital assets and actually really exploit this disruptive technology. So what are those needs? Well, I mean, they ultimately need a series of technologies that enable dynamic forms of rapid issuance, and that can be for things like securities, real estate, commodities, and more. They need to be able to deploy secondary markets that actually can enable those operations and handle things like liquidity and cap table management. But of course, they also need to handle the all-important compliance as another facet of this. And so what we've been building out is a foundation platform that can be white labeled with partners and utilized rapidly to enable anybody from right up to the largest banks to be able to really embrace this technology and innovation right now, as opposed to it being something, you know, a number of years in the future.
Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you, David. So I hear keywords like, you know, issuance process, optimization, liquidity, and compliance. So hopefully we can talk more about that later. Maybe we can move on to Jonas from F10. Hey, Jonas.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, Shufan. Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm Jonas. I'm heading the F10 incubator here in Singapore. F10 is really an open innovation platform for our corporate partners. So on the ground here in Singapore specifically, we work with Six Group, with Bank Julius Baer, with Franklin Templeton, R3, as well as Clayton, really helping the corporates on the open innovation side. And then on the other hand, we are an incubator for startups, really helping them to find their product market fit and then scale and match them with investors, etc. So yeah, really excited. Blockchain is a big topic for us, especially this year. So glad to be here.
Thank you. We look forward to hearing from, you know, what you've been seeing in this space, the innovations, especially from the startups, and, you know, what problems they are solving. So maybe we can have Leon from Greenium.
Yeah, hey, I'm Leon. Thanks for having me. So yeah, founder of GreeniumX, which you can also see in my background as affiliated with Chintai as a client. So we would characterize ourselves as a platform that will allow somehow challenger asset managers that bring new type of investment products, as well as reaching out to different capital markets, allowing that sort of to happen on our platform. And the investment products that we are focused on will be carbon negative projects. So we're not directly investing into carbon credits outright, but into projects that create these carbon credits. So kind of like we're a producer of credits, and also have the partnerships to monetize them for investors. And because it's a problem that we're trying to solve that is quite global in nature, we feel like this distributed ledger technology that Chintai can offer factors in very nicely for that. So yeah, excited to be on this program to discuss more.
Thank you for that, Leon. That's really interesting. We want to talk more about the Greenium platform. And then, of course, last but not least, can we have Ziheng? Happy to have you join us.
Hi, Shufan. Thanks for inviting me. So, hi, everybody. My name is Ziheng. I work from Plug and Play Singapore office. So, Plug and Play, we are a Silicon Valley headquartered early stage VC. So, we've invested from the early legendary companies like PayPal, Lending Club, Dropbox, N26, to more recently, Blockdaemon, which is one of our first portfolio in the blockchain space that became a unicorn. We are very industry agnostic and one of the most active early stage investors in the world. And on the other hand, we, similar to F10, we also work extensively with our corporate partners in identifying innovation areas, startup sourcing, as well as evaluating potential investment targets together. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Ziheng. My laptop is muting me every now and then. So very happy to have the panel, gathered today to talk about this. So I think to kick this off, I want to start with, talking about some of the use cases that you guys are seeing on blockchain, some of the assets that are being digitized. And I'm hoping I can start with David from Chintai. I know that Chintai has vast experience helping, businesses modernize and streamline capital markets for, banks, asset managers, and SMEs in quite a few markets all over the world. So, and you came from like a wealth of experience and financial institutions. So I want to start by maybe if you can share with us what you're seeing in this space? And can you give us a bit more color in terms of the examples and the use cases?
Yep, certainly, absolutely. And I think what's an interesting thing to observe for the audience generally related to the pace of adoption of digital assets, particularly over the last 3 to 5 years, is that we saw an interesting hype cycle starting in around about 2017-18. And I think the expectation in the industry was that we would see probably large amounts of tokenized real estate and securities already. And what actually happened around that period was that we really saw the financial services industry globally start to embrace blockchain as a disruptive concept with some major efficiency gains that would be of interest to them. But what we also discovered as an industry, I think, was that there was really a mismatch between their needs as financial institutions to protect their reputation and to be very, very compliant and careful with how they utilize this technology. And obviously what we were seeing on the public blockchain side, where you were obviously seeing some, should we say, less salubrious behavior that was not fitting. So then fast forwarding to where we are now, therefore, I think what we're really seeing is the first really meaningful adoption pattern starting to form this year. We've seen some very encouraging signs over the last 6 to 12 months in discussions with some quite large Asia-Pacific-based financial wealth funds that have actually got defined digital asset strategies. They're looking to really build out their businesses in a range of ways to actually give them a competitive edge, particularly over really large players in the industry who obviously have instilled advantages right now. And so to give you a flavor of the types of things they're looking to do, it could be things like issuing out of tokenized funds, fractionalization of real estate, and actually providing that to a wider range of consumers and investors that currently don't have access to those as an asset class. They're also looking at ways of actually providing new types of ways of trading as well and making those more dynamic, and also generally looking at ways that they can actually expand out those into more revenue streams as well. So really looking at our own client base, we're finding that we're getting a lot of organic approaches from companies, particularly focused on industries that are looking to or that have large growth and disruptive potential. So the whole green tech space is a great example of this. Everything from the carbon markets to the likes of GreeniumX are great examples of this, and they are definitely driving a lot of the traction. The other big one is definitely real estate as well, and I think that comes about because of the potential there as an asset class to add liquidity to it and expand that out and make some fundamental changes. Where you've got things like securities, and we can maybe move on to NFTs later, but where you have things like securities, if you actually look at them, they are already quite efficiently traded in a unitized form. So the efficiency gains are slightly different. And again, I think the concerns around having a really high quality compliant solution is what's certainly holding back some of the adoption curve there, although it's definitely, I think, coming as well.
Right. Thank you for that. The pace of change is indeed quite phenomenal. I mean, like that's why we kind of titled this, "Is this the next revolution?" So I just want to zoom in to focus on, the promise of this is supposed, like you mentioned, to create new revenue streams. Are you seeing from, your client examples or your deployment cases where they were really successful in bringing in more liquidity, more being able to reach more investors? Are there more sectors that are more successful than the others?
Yeah, and there are, and a lot of that so far has depended on what the underlying asset class is. So one of our earliest clients is doing is actually deploying carbon-backed tokens. So they have a new way of actually sequestering carbon, removing it from the atmosphere to provide an alternative to the existing carbon credit market. And because that underlying token is not in itself regulated, it's a utility token, that gives them more flexibility to actually face off to retail investors globally and not necessarily have to place certain restrictions around who can be participants in those markets. I think where you start to move into regulated assets like, for example, real estate and other forms of commodities, there the issuers have to factor in they need to obviously play within the rules of the market, and that for me really reflects an ongoing partnership with the regulators to ensure that we get to a point where they're comfortable with the operation of those markets, the controls around them, and at that point, hopefully, we'll see an expansion out of who's able to participate in those types of markets too.
Interesting, thank you. So you were talking about carbon as one of the projects that you see. So that gives me a nice segue to move to Leon, Greenium. So Greenium to me has a very interesting premise and sort of a nice angle to sustainability. So Greenium enables the community to invest in carbon negative projects, and the community is literally anyone. And so my question is this what is frequently being talked about, a DAO, decentralized autonomous organization? And if it is, can you tell us more about that, what that means?
Yeah, I think there are a few questions. So first of all, because we are not like the other client, Just Carbon, focusing on carbon credits, we are actually issuing STOs, which are regulated, so security token offerings. So we have to stay within the framework of the regulators. So we cannot, from day one, open ourselves up to retail, which is kind of a problem that I think a lot of other asset managers were facing, or platforms that try to build up an exchange here in Singapore, which is, even though you comply with all the rules that were set by MAS in the beginning, you might only be able to issue out to AIs, accredited investors. So there's really not a lot of liquidity from day one that you can access, even though you're jumping through all kinds of hoops to basically become a tokenized or to have digital assets issued. So we have to stay within that framework for now and build that partnership, and that's really where we're leveraging Chintai to help us with that compliant framework. Regarding the DAO, I think it really makes sense for GreeniumX to be a DAO, and if we are going down that road, and we will do so from day one. So, and DAO meaning decentralized autonomous organization. So meaning the community itself will govern certain aspects of how we derive at certain decisions. So in the beginning, I think it should, in order to kick things off, we might have to be a little bit more on the centralized end of the spectrum of a DAO, where there's a management team in place that will set up certain things, execute on transactions in the real world, sign agreements and so on. But that management team should then be at the review, or at the mercy almost at the DAO, kind of like the DAO being their employer, and the DAO also taking control of the treasury, which will be funded by, let's say, a token issuance, or then also be funded by fee income from the platform. So that basically structure needs to be there from day one. I think we cannot shift into a DAO, which I think other people have tried. So that structure needs to be there from day one. And it is our objective to go there. Yeah.
Thank you. So hopefully compliance, and that's interesting. So the compliance actually does define the how much who are the investors, right, that the platforms or the projects can target. So hopefully as we evolve, we can be more inclusive. So this leads to my other question, right? You said you're affiliated to Chintai and you're using Chintai's platform, and both are Singapore registered companies. So the question for me, and recently the Singapore government just announced in a recent budget pretty aggressive targets for sustainability to be net zero by, I think, 2050 or mid-century. So why did you choose Singapore to do this?
I think Singapore is at the forefront of building out, or at least helping players like us in this industry to set up shop in a way. It's also the place where you just go out and you have lunch with someone, and all of a sudden they pass you this, which is actually, oh, you cannot see maybe with my background. It's a carbon credit as a kind of a poker chip. So it actually represents 1 ton of CO2 that's been sequestered. And I could, for example, now go on this QR code that's here and offset my own personal emission. So somebody paid $10 to create this carbon credit. It's backed by 1 ton of CO2 emissions. And that would roughly represent 1 flight from Singapore to Tokyo in economy class. So it's kind of a neat idea. You kind of run into all kinds of people here that are very excited about this space. and maybe also anecdotally, and I have a background in private equity and asset management. So about 2 years ago, you would be laughed out of any room in a business discussion if you mention carbon neutrality. Today, you wouldn't get a seat at the table if you're not talking about it. So it's become one of the key focal points across the board in all considerations for investment managers.
That's really, really interesting. Thank you, Leon. So I think we can, we're hearing from platform enablers, and now we can move to sort of organizations that are, you know, seeing a lot of innovation, like like maybe we start with plug and play, right? Ziheng. So I know you plug and play works with corporates in sort of identifying innovation areas, startup sourcing, and even helping them evaluate investment targets. So I wanted, naturally, you know, I want to find out from you, you know, for the audience, what are you also seeing in this space? I'm sure you come across, you know, a lot of corporates that are already in, you know, or trying to get into this space. What are you seeing?
Yeah, definitely, great question. I think the interest level as well as the actual adoptions in the blockchain technology has never been as high as before. I think some of the most relevant use cases David has just addressed before, like trade finance or investment product by the banks, tokenization of commercial properties by the real estate developers. I want to bring up two topics that I think are very trendy and relevant to the society right now. One is in the healthcare space. So we are seeing a lot of pharmaceutical companies asking us how do they leverage the blockchain's traceability into the medical supply chain process to verify the authenticity of the COVID vaccines during the pandemic. And I think this is a really relevant use case and immediate to the society right now, especially for developing countries. And the second is from insurance companies. Although insurance companies are considered, you know, the slow movers in the innovation space, but right now they're also exploring, let's say, how do they put claims on the blockchain so that they can trigger automated claim payout for the customers, which in the past would take at least 2 or 3 months to go through the whole claim process so that for the customer to get paid. And coming from venture capital space ourselves, we are also seeing a lot of investment from the traditional banks, financial services players to actively and aggressively invest in this space. I think this is another form of adoption, and it's a faster way to get your skin in the game as well. So I think within Southeast Asia, especially in Thailand, CM Commercial Bank has been very aggressive. Their venture arm 10X has been investing in Ripple, BlockFi, Signum, Fireblocks, Sandbox, just many of the leading blockchain projects. And they also acquired Bitcoin last year, so which is one of the largest crypto exchange in Thailand. And as well as Kronsky's Finovate also invested in ZipMax, which is another leading crypto exchange in the region. So I think the interest level is definitely strong. It's just that everyone or every company is taking different approach.
Sounds like quite a bit going on across sectors and in Southeast Asia. So based on what you're seeing, what do you think is the, you know, the biggest challenge, or even you know, like we talked about sort of a compliance and regulatory framework, you know, determining how much liquidity you can cover. Are there opportunities, right? There are also for businesses.
I think a big question that all these companies are trying to answer is how do they actually bridge the gap between their existing legacy technology infrastructure and the new technology layer, or let's say, how do you bridge Web 2 and Web 3? So, and what role me as a bank or me as an insurance company can play in the process? If you think about many of the current blockchain and Web 3 solutions, frankly speaking, I think they are still relatively immature with a relatively poor UI UX design and a cumbersome checkout experience. So who can be the PayPal or the Stripe, the AWS for Web 3, and who can be potentially really the winner of this space? So I think companies like Fireblocks or Blockdaemon are already building the infrastructure layer to paving the way for other companies. And for banks, one of the biggest opportunities would be how do I partner with such players to create a win-win situation. I think especially for many companies in Singapore or Southeast Asia, they can really look to their counterparties in the US. How are they making the movement in this space? For example, Blockdaemon has partnered with Goldman Sachs to create and host the institutional staking nodes on the blockchain network. So Goldman Sachs, their clients can earn staking rewards on over 20 proof of stake networks. And while Goldman remains the custodian and management of the funds. So I think this is a perfect example of how do you create new revenue streams while still leveraging on your existing strengths and in the meantime, adopting the new blockchain technologies.
Thank you. That's interesting. It's quite a nice place that you are at where you can see, you know, what's happening in the ecosystem and even the potential collaborations with the different players. So I want to move on to Jonas. So Jonas, I know you are also speaking in a conference tomorrow on a similar topic. So hopefully this is a nice prelude for you. So you know, in F10, you kind of are in a similar sort of angle, looking at the ecosystem, at the different players, at the different startups that are trying to solve, you know, the different problems that present itself because of the pace of change that's happening in this space. So, and obviously, I think I'm hearing consensus that, you know, this space is still quite nascent, right? So, and because of that, there needs to be a continued sort of innovation and continued awareness of the problems that we have as an industry and a funnel of innovation to solve it. So what for you works, you know, what F10 has done to ensure that there's innovation and we have the right sort of collaboration platform to solve the problems that we are facing today?
Yeah, great question. I think I can underline what Ziheng said in terms of partnerships. I believe that that's really the way forward also for the traditional players. And as I said, we have a number of corporates in our ecosystem, namely, for example, R3, they have built the Corda platform, which is an enterprise-grade private blockchain, very strong in the financial market space, for example. Or then on the other hand, we have a public blockchain, Clayton. It's actually Kakao's public blockchain arm. It's a layer 1 blockchain, very much focused then again on the GameFi space, the metaverse and creator economy. And then more the traditional players, we have the Swiss Stock Exchange also being part of us. And they're obviously also very bullish and exploring the digital asset space. With SIX Digital Exchange being the exchange in Switzerland that got regulated now and got the license. And here in Singapore, they have, for example, a joint venture with SBI out of Japan, where they're building the Asia Digital Exchange. So it's a big topic, I think, for all the players in the financial services space right now. And maybe I just give a couple of examples to put a bit, you know, use cases into this round. So Chintai is really the tokenization platform, right, as we heard. But we had a startup in our portfolio, in our incubator called Domani. It's a startup that offers fund management on the blockchain. So let's say you have, as an investor, you have maybe access to this one real estate that was tokenized by Chintai. But as an investor, you want to diversify your portfolio. And what Domani is offering is really for fund managers to create the portfolio and for investors then to invest directly into the portfolio and not just into this one token where you would have really a risk profile that is not very much desired. So that's a startup called Domani that we had, really interesting. And then on the other hand, we mentioned it earlier, you know, there are a lot of risks as well to this new space, right? And compliance is a very big topic also for us and our partners. So anti-money laundering, KYC being a big topic. We have recently worked with, for example, Merkle Science here in Singapore, or invested in Coin Firm. These are basically operator of blockchain-based AML platforms, basically for crypto assets, which are designed to protect against ransomware hacks, human trafficking, sanction evasion, terrorist financing, all the bad stuff. by risk scoring entities. And of course, in the blockchain space, we're talking a lot about addresses, right? You basically have an address as well as transactions. So that's a topic that also is very interesting. Goes very much then into the infrastructure, right? What do you need if you want to get into the digital asset space? I think custody is a big topic. Ziheng mentioned already Fireblocks, for example, being a very dominant big player now already. Globally, we also worked here on the ground with companies like On-Chain Custodian or Propine, local digital asset custodian companies. Maybe a few words also, what kind of challenges are there for the startups? As we work with them, we obviously see the upside and the opportunities, but we also see the challenges that they're facing. And I think one of the challenges is interoperability. So if you're building on a blockchain, right, like which blockchain am I actually going to choose? Because interoperability is still not quite there. And that's really a challenge. You might have to deploy across a number of blockchains. They're using different programming languages. So not that easy, right? Regulation, we mentioned already. And then I think if you want to work with corporates, with traditional players, I think the challenge is really the knowledge gap. It has been the knowledge gap. So for many years, I think Leon mentioned that carbon topics have been a no-go, but I think also if you talked about crypto a few years ago and visited the bank, you would have just been kicked out of the meeting. This has changed now. I think especially last year, what we have seen is that the corporates, they have built capabilities and teams for digital assets, and they're really building up that knowledge internally now. And I think this year is also for us a year where I see a lot of experimentation and exploration, where they get their hands dirty basically and working again, partnering with startups and running pilots.
Thank you for that. Thank you for the recap. So I think in the interest of time, I have a couple of questions that I want to ask of the panel. They are in two areas. So perhaps it's very much related to what Jonas just said, right? Maybe to David and Leon, I would ask, based on your clients and the use cases, your deployments, what would the top two things you would advise a fintech or a business that is, thinking about digitizing the assets or going to this space to think about?
That's a very good question. I think it obviously does partly depend on those companies and on what they're trying to achieve. But if we presume, for example, we're just talking about more established financial services companies, of which there's an awful lot based in Singapore and beyond, the most important things they have to really be clear about internally is what they're looking to achieve. So, in many cases, there's more of a vague understanding that this is potentially the next big thing, and they need to be aware of this, and they need to, in some way, start to utilize blockchain technology and so on. It's very rare that actually we've come across firms that have really put together a cohesive digital asset strategy as an organization that maps out exactly what they're looking to achieve. Some of them have done it, and the ones that are best placed to then actually go out and assess who they need to partner with and what they're looking to achieve. So the number one thing I think that they all need to be doing is to be very, very clear on what they're looking to achieve. And that could be anything from looking to actually pioneer some issuances, for example, and maybe a good example is the golden one that Jonas was just talking about, where maybe they're looking to expand out and provide some new forms of dynamic types of passive income opportunities to clients. However, many others are looking to actually say, you know what, we actually want to get into the exchange business for the first time. We actually want to be able to not just carry out types of issuances where we've not being able to price them out. We want to do it for a range of new asset classes, and we want to actually expand out our offerings to a range of new clients as well. And those types of companies, they need to be able to go through and assess how are we going to handle this type of innovation? Are we going to build it in-house ourselves, or are we going to actually find a partner or multiple partners? Do we want to leverage some sort of scalable private chain solution, an industry solution, or do we want to try and interface with the public chains and with all of the upsides and downs of those? And those, I think, are the top things that really need that organizations globally need to get clear within themselves, their internal strategies, and from that the rest really does start to flow.
Thank you for that. Can we hear from
I think just to piggyback on it, I think the vision and knowing where you're trying to go is the most important. But I've also seen companies tell me that they started to embark on this digital issuance or tokenization route 5 years ago in 2017 in close coordination with the regulators. And just now they're really taking off. And the reason this has taken so long is because it was kind of a top-down decision that somebody decided we have to go down this road, and you guys just figure it out. So basically turning someone who was an investment manager yesterday is all of a sudden head of digital assets in that company, and then just makes all kinds of mistakes maybe. And some of them are unpredictable, so like starting to work on Ethereum and then a year later gas fees making your entire business model obsolete. Then maybe moving to private chain solution, which kind of then defeats the purpose and you're not really reaching the target audience that you want. And then maybe just now finding a way where you're looking at interoperability. You have a sort of, even though it's a venture capital term, I think it applies to real estate or any type of investment management, is a product market fit. Because investments are not just, you cannot just throw them out there in a way and hope somebody will gobble them up. It's not like you can tokenize this building that I'm sitting in right now and put it on Ethereum and somebody will, and then millions of people will want to buy it, right? The SGX is, for example, it's a good example for REITs businesses to really be thriving on it, even though right now they also trade at discounted values to what their book value is. So there's still, I think, improvement to be made. But the investment manager should be very clear, or the tokenization is people seeking to tokenize their assets should be very clear on the markets that I'm opening myself or my assets up to. Are they really suitable for token investors? Because it sometimes feels like maybe this offering is between the chairs, where traditional real estate investors don't want to have anything to do with tokens because of the bad reputation that's still lingering. Whereas token investors don't want to be in a boring asset like real estate. But I think it's converging now. There's both sides are nearing each other, and it just takes people to offer these investment products and also clearly show that there's benefits there. So, for example, offering like a tokenized REIT that is better than a REIT because it has lower fees and trading costs. It's more transparent and frictionless, so you actually get a better yield. So this is what in the end counts for investors, by getting exposure to these assets at the lowest possible cost.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And so it seems that, I mean, if I summarize, being quite clear about your intent, what you're trying to achieve, and having at least a digital asset strategy or having some thoughts around it is important before embarking into this, and sort of that will pull down to the tech, the way you would, the technologies you would choose and the way you would deploy it. I wanted to pick off the comment that you make, that you said that anything, like anything can be tokenized, right? And if you look at the NFTs and the metaverse, it does give a perception that anything can be tokenized. And I wanted to, and I'm picking off quite a few questions about NFT in a Q&A. Jonas, would you want to chime in on this? In terms of what, if you're a business and you're seeing all these things happening in NFT, how should you think about it from your, your business or product or solution point of view?
Yeah, great question. I think, again, we are very early, right? Even in NFT, I think it really took off last year. We have seen kind of initial use cases more as collectibles. And now we really see projects and collections being dropped with a real roadmap and with utilities behind. If you're owner of this NFT, you get various access or advantages to that company or to that creator. The metaverse is obviously blending into that, right? And as we are Singapore FinTech Association panel here, I think JP Morgan is kind of the most recent player that actually joined. They have just opened a lounge in Decentraland, where you can go and visit them. You can watch a number of webinars they had. You can click on a few research reports. I think this is really also just the beginning. That's not really yet the experience that I believe we will have in the future. But I think that for us, NFTs and the metaverse where it's really going to take off this year, I think is gaming. If you look at venture funding in gaming on the blockchain, it is ridiculous. These are really big numbers, and lots of projects are being funded. We are also running, by the way, a program together with Clayton where we incubate GameFi startups, and there really it's amazing that now suddenly you have the opportunity to monetize your in-game assets, right? Before you used to just you play and you acquire all these assets. You're an amazing player, and then you kind of fed up with the game and you drop it and you spend a lot of money and it's kind of worthless now. But in the future and already now, let's look at Axie. If you've been a successful player on their play to earn, right? They have really made a living. Players in the Philippines and other countries, they have been forming these gaming guilds and they have been playing, and they have earned a lot of money, frankly, from playing and then acquiring assets and selling them on an exchange. So a marketplace. So I think these are really, really exciting developments, and that's something I'm also personally very bullish and excited about.
You have some investments in NFTs?
No investment advice on this panel.
Okay, just kidding. Okay, thank you. So I think I'm quite aware of time. I want to also make sure that we give time to answer the Q&A. So one last question just for the panel about regulations and compliance. I hear about from all of you how compliance and the framework, and because it's still nascent, right? This is a developing space. What would be your wish list of how this should evolve in terms of regulations and compliance supporting the development of the industry in the right way?
Well, I can certainly go on that one all day. So regulatory and compliance is a very interesting area globally because you get radically different approaches. So obviously the United States is known, shall we say, for having a very confusing framework, and that provides an environment that's very hard for companies, particularly in the digital asset space, to really flourish in right now. What I really like about Singapore, along with other countries and financial hubs like London, is that they have quite a cohesive, well thought through digital asset strategy that's trying to actually provide some clarity around the different types of tokenized assets and how they need to potentially be governed. And it's being done in a way with the industry that is quite collaborative. So what we're seeing is good open discussions between the industry, between the regulator, which is helping both sides shape what's actually needed. And the general driver behind that is to ensure that the consumers are well protected, and we get to a point where ultimately, whenever products are being deployed out, be it a security or a real estate or an NFT, ultimately we get to a point where it's optimized for the best interests of a flourishing commercial industry without stifling innovation. So I think, to answer your question, my wish list, therefore, is that more regulators ultimately adopt that kind of approach globally. Right now, we have a couple of leaders in the industry that are providing that right kind of balance, I think, between a regulatory framework that doesn't stifle innovation, but the kind of protections needed to enable big money to flow in and mass adoption to take place. And I think a number of other regulators globally, I hope they follow in those footsteps. So that really, what I'd love to actually see is actually a common set of rules that really apply across the board for digital assets in as many regions as possible. Because one of the big challenges you have, GreeniumX would be a great example of this, is that they effectively, for every different territory they want to actually get out and interact with, there's a different set of regulatory rules. So maybe there's a completely different set of rules in Germany than there might be, say, for Singapore. and therefore they need a solution that can map those and ensure they're enforced on the chain. And that just generally adds to the complexity and the cost for anybody in this space.
Collaborative and sort of common framework, right? Can we hear from,
yeah,
can we hear from, either Leon, Jonas, or Ziheng? I'm sure everybody has a wish list.
Right. I mean, very hard to follow up on that. I think that was very comprehensive and completely aligned with how we're thinking about this. Maybe just to be add one more specific thing that I would maybe hope for is that if you're a licensed fund manager in Singapore, I think and you decide to go down the tokenization part, you should not face any higher scrutiny just because you're doing a token offering compared to doing just another offering of shares. So I just hope that in the future we can access the public markets with these token assets, and I think this is where we are going. So I'm looking forward to that. But the whole point about tokenizing some of these investments is that they are not available to the public yet, and they should be, in my opinion. Some of these are private market assets, and so, like David mentioned, there should be a little bit more maybe protection and investor education around this, but at some point these assets should be available.
Yes, yeah, to be more inclusive, but I'm sure there are considerations like, awareness and understanding of such investment products for the average civilian to balance.
If I can share my 2 cents as well, I think just follow what Leon David has mentioned. I think the Singapore government on the MAS has been acting very preemptively to set up the rules and trying to bring regulatory clarity to the investors. But as a regulator, you will never catch the speed of what's the innovations that have been happening in this space, which is why I do see a lot of public criticizing, MAS recent guidelines on no public marketing of the digital payment tokens, or the MAS position on the NFT that has been released in the past few weeks. But I think for retail investors, your risk appetite is just not the same at the institutional level. And with the volatilities in the price changes, we do need a lot of guidance and regulations, at least for the retail investors. For the enterprise, that's another different story, right? And we're seeing from the government level, Temasek, JSA, EDBI, everybody actually has been investing in tokenized projects in the past 12 months. But so I think MAS has been pushing really hard to make the differentiation between the retail institution investors as well as for the retail investors.
Yeah, that's two balanced views. Last but not least, I suppose, Jonas, your wish list, maybe in the NFT space.
No, I think I just want to add, this is a big opportunity, frankly, for countries, right? Like look at Singapore. If you're a forward-thinking regulator, if you look at how many Web3 startups came over here to Singapore because the regulatory framework is relatively clear, I think this is a big opportunity. Same happened actually in Switzerland, where I'm also from, where we have the crypto valley and a very forward-thinking regulator, and we are seeing other jurisdictions that are equally bullish and open, and I think this is a great opportunity, and the regulator can make the difference here.
Yeah, I think we just lost a little bit of audio. Sorry for that. Jonas, you wanna close off, or
did you hear me now or not?
maybe just like last closing sentence.
I think my last closing sentence was this is a very big opportunity, and the regulator can be a differentiator in this for a country, really.
Yeah, agree. So that's a nice wrap to the question. So we have about 5 minutes left. I want to give some time to answer the questions we are getting on the Q&A box. One of the questions is, what's the difference between cryptocurrency and security tokens? So would any of our experts here, like to help decrypt or clarify? Maybe David?
Well, that's an interesting one in itself because it again depends on the jurisdiction. But I mean, if you look at the United States as one good example of this, there is an open question right now that most cryptocurrencies that you will see in the coin market cap list may be securities in some form, at least in their view. I personally think that's a very simplistic way to look at cryptocurrencies generally. Really what they are depends on the underlying purpose of the token itself as it partakes and links to some sort of ecosystem. So cryptocurrencies for me are a catch-all term for different types of tokens, and they can be utility tokens that link to a network, like for example Ethereum's, and they can be the underlying value transfer token that links to the network security, like a Bitcoin. Or they can have other completely different properties instead. So for me, the biggest fundamental thing there is to consider is that not all cryptocurrencies are the same. Not all cryptocurrencies are a security token, but some of them are. And then perhaps stepping back to ask, well, what is a security in the context of security tokens? We're all fairly familiar, I think, with equities, for example. So you may tokenize shares in an underlying company that pay out dividends and other forms of passive income. Maybe they have voting rights. That's very clearly a security in a way that we're all comfortable with. But of course, when you have the innovation potential of digital assets, what you can do is you can actually program these and customize them such that they start to very quickly merge and have properties that no longer look very security-like anymore. They've got some security-like aspects and some not. And this is one of the challenges for regulators generally, is that they're trying to regulate a brand new asset class, and they're trying to do it from the lens of how they've seen the rest of the financial system. But digital assets are the first true new asset class since derivatives in the early 80s. And that is a very fundamental shift that will take a long time for the regulators to gradually get on top of. And part of the reason for that is that we're going to see innovation probably accelerating in this sector, really ahead of the pace with which regulators can necessarily keep up with it. And so to finish off on that generally, not all cryptocurrencies are security tokens, but some are.
Not all cryptocurrencies are securities, but some are.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for that. So I hope we've answered that question. I'm picking up a few questions on Greenium, Leon.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just cover this one. What is the Greenium fund about? Can I invest in it? Is this related to your question, what you talked about earlier, right? Who can invest?
Right. So there's discussion with a Singapore VCC that will have a fund series for this that can be tokenized. So you would just have to bear with us for the moment. We aim to launch on Chintai's platform in the second quarter this year. So, but there will be some news announcement before that. And I also see Kenneth asked what are the white paper tokenomics of GreeniumX. So this actually goes to exactly what David just said. So while our fund would be a security token, which is basically the digital representation of a share in that fund, if we are talking about tokenomics of GreeniumX, which would be native token of the fund and maybe structured also like a DAO, that's then more of a cryptocurrency rather than a security token, and that will be also maybe second quarter or third quarter this year that's coming out.
Thank you. I think for the rest of the questions about Greenium and white papers and what are the tokenomics, we will try and take these questions offline. I saw some questions on NFT. What are the practical use cases of NFT? I hope that during the sharing, especially from Jonas, we did cover some of that. In the interest of time, I think I'm going to just wrap the Q&A. And what we'll do is some of the questions we're picking out specifically for Plug and Play for F10, we'll try and, if possible, link you with the speakers offline and to try and answer that question. So thank you for this. If I was to summarize, I hope we managed to capture some, good takeaways for our audience today in terms of our fintech businesses or members thinking about digital assets, whether they're exploring or going to this space. Obviously there is a broad spectrum of use cases that all of us are seeing, from traditional asset securities to real estate to healthcare to insurance to NFTs. And there's consensus that it's important before any business goes into this space to really think about your objective and what you're trying to achieve. Hopefully have a digital asset strategy, right? This is some of the things that I hear. And these would have implication on, your choice of technology platform, your choice of partners, and how you would deploy it and hopefully save time. And all these, I guess, in the hope that the technology and tokenizing assets, we are able to reap the benefits that all businesses look for: cost reduction, optimization of process, shorter settlement time, and most importantly, the bottom line, right? Enable businesses to find more liquidity, reach a larger pool of investors or clients. And I'm also registering that the regulatory and compliance framework is very important, right? As the industry is quite nascent and is growing very fast. So I'm hearing that there is an interest to collaborate with the regulator to work towards a simple, collaborative, and hopefully common framework that will nurture this growth. So thank you very much, panelists. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your expert insights. I hope this has been useful for our attendees. And thank you for joining us. And hopefully, this session is recorded. We'll put it up onto LinkedIn and on YouTube. If you have partners or friends who are unable to attend, they can access the stream online, and we'll share the stream after. Thank you. Over back to you, MJ.
Thanks, Shufen. You basically said what I wanted to say. So once again, I would like to thank GreeniumX, Plug and Play, F10, and Chintai for taking the time to educate us on asset tokenization. As Shufen mentioned, this will be shared over YouTube, and I'll be sending out a post-webinar survey regarding the webinar. So if you are interested in more of such events, please look out for our weekly EDM, where we will share with you the upcoming events that we have. All right, that's all for today. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Thank you.